Melissa Flower. I'm here with Wordsmyth Theater Company, and we are doing the talkback for the Goodbye Levee by Mike Solomonson. And we have Mike here and we have Eva Laporte, and we'll get started, but if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. So, okay. So Mike.
Yes.
I am very curious, and actually a few other people that I was talking to about this play are curious about where the idea came from, kind of the journey of this play, and also your own story as a playwright. So whichever thing comes first, or if both things are tied together.
Okay, sure. Actually, this is based on a true story, an Iowa court case. I'm trying to remember if it was 2015 or 16, where a man was brought to trial for having sexual relations with his wife who was suffering from dementia. And I just knew there was a story there, but it didn't come immediately. Probably took me a couple years, really, just sort of having it in the back of my head. When I finally started writing it, I was initially kind of thinking I was probably going to make it more of a domestic drama, but Celeste emerged and kind of wanted the stage. And so I just started following her in terms of I started writing it. And so it turned into kind of her journey. And I think that was maybe reflected in a lot of the fractured structure, different way of kind of telling the story. So that was kind of initially the genesis. It was a finalist for the Eugene O'Neill National Theater Center's Playwrights Conference. It was a finalist for a number of other competitions. Won New Works at the Works competition at the Playhouse on the Square in Memphis. It was supposed to be produced in January of 2021, but they've informed me that they've had to cancel, at least for right now, that production. It had a reading there, so that was a live reading. So I got to see it once performed, in a theater space with everyone together. And it was had a reading at the Jewish Ensemble Theater Jet Fest Festival in Michigan. And then this would be the third reading it's had. So second time online. As a playwright, probably my master's actually was in playwriting, but I've kind of went the academic route. So a lot of my time has been spent kind of more as a academic and director, also doing acting. So probably 2017 is when I had a sabbatical at the college and decided I really wanted to kind of get back in touch with my playwriting background. And so since the last 3 years, I've been kind of putting a focus on writing and getting a lot of 10-minute plays produced and showing some promise with my full lengths.
And the plays that you write, are they normally this kind of fractured thing, or is this kind of a new?
Yeah, this is probably more of one of my more experimental pieces with structure. I mean, other scripts perhaps have played a little bit. I mean, it's been maybe episodic. The most recent one that I've written is kind of happens in real time, just starts and kind of goes, straight through without any breaks and kind of telling a story in about 90 minutes. So I guess I've kind of played a little bit with my structural approach. And then sometimes the story kind of dictates, how to go about telling it.
Yeah. Okay. And what, okay, so then I wanted to ask, so Eva is here, and so when you got the play into the Zoom, I mean, like,
yeah,
you have to go into a Zoom room, but what were some of the things that came up for you while you were going through the script?
my first read, I thought, this is so visual, and so there's so much spectacle in changing the narrative, going forward in time and backwards in time, and this concept of an unreliable narrator who goes back, and how much do you trust each moment of the play to be truthful, or just her memory, or her fractured memory. And so my first thought really was, gosh, this is so visual. It's like, what did I call it? It's like it's a circus memory play. Like there's anything could happen. It's unpredictable. And my first thought was, well, Zoom is really cool. Like virtually, we could do all these things. We could have polling features, and we can use, you know, things popping in and out. And we can have the puppet. And I had to draw myself back and go, okay, what do we actually want to accomplish? And how little could we do, right? Because that's often what happens in a development reading, is we like how well does the play work, and what does the audience understand from the play with as little as possible, just that text and the characters that come through and the plot that emerges. You know, do they understand the events of the play without a more visual spectacle? So I got really excited, Mike, about like, ooh, because I immediately went into like a rehearsal room space where we could play and bring props. And so that was my first challenge of like, okay, well, let me pare back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you had the scarf. I love that you had like a person playing an audience member, and then yeah. And that, because that's not scripted, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a lot of fun, because I could tell that seemed like that was the first time this was happening to them. They genuinely were having reactions. I thought, oh, this is really fun to see. I was really appreciated that. That gave me a real sense of what was going on with the audience participation.
Yes. Yeah. So I prepared the groups separately, right? So we rehearsed with the actors, went through the script, and the way Mike's written it, it's the audience is the other character, which is why I chose to read stage directions with my camera on, so that Celeste was never alone. I imagine when we're in the theater, we're always going to be aware of one another. Back when we can get into a theater again where we're close to each other, the audience is going to be aware of their fellow audience members almost constantly, because Celeste is bringing attention to them and talking to them, and the way they respond changes the way Celeste tells the story. So we rehearsed with the actors separately, and then I invited some theater artists to be audience members. And the only preparation I gave them was, you know, turn your camera on and off. It's about this long, and you'll be called upon. We're not going to ask you to jump around and do a chicken dance or anything, but you will be called upon and kind of answer in the moment. And then I gave Shariba Rivers, who played Celeste, who's just an amazing actress, of course. I gave her a list of the audience names, because that way she could kind of point out and call to them, and the audience person would know, okay, it's time for me to turn my camera on and listen and respond. But yeah, those were completely unscripted audience responses.
That's so nice.
Yeah, cool. And they vote. You know, Mike was talking about this real court case, and I'm actually interested to know how that real court case turned out. But they vote as is scripted in the play. The audience decides, you know, is he guilty? Is he innocent of these charges that are brought against him? And so that was the real count.
Guilty.
Yeah. In rehearsal, he was innocent, and in the recording, he was guilty. So that was kind of interesting. Like, ooh, every night could be different with this play, depending on the audience.
Yeah, and that was one of the things too, because of the first reading, I think in Memphis, he was innocent, and then in Michigan he was guilty. But then there were audience members in the Talkback who felt like they didn't understand the directions, and they kind of wanted to do a revote. I mean, they were really into it. So I thought, oh, okay, that's really interesting.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't want to take Melissa's job, but about this vote, which I kind of describe as this change motion of the play, right? Like we build up to this moment, and then whatever's decided there happens right before the conclusion of the play, right? Do you have an opinion, Mike, on how it is, or do you really want it to be presented in whichever way the audience? Does it change anything about Celeste's character or the story if the audience decides one thing or another, or like they can't decide which they want?
Yeah, I really don't have a vested interest. I mean, I feel like I tried to lay out both arguments, maybe in those closing arguments that the lawyers give, and I kind of am hoping that it would be one of those things that would generate discussion, among audience members. They may disagree, and they might, that I felt like that would be beneficial, so it's not all cut and dried, and people have to still grapple with the ideas, even irregardless of how the verdict came out. In the Iowa court case, he was found innocent, although some details of the Iowa case differ from maybe what I did in terms of in the play. The husband admitted that he had the relationship with his wife, where in the Iowa court case, he said it didn't happen. So it's not apples to apples necessarily, but
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like he said that he didn't actually have sex with her.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Huh. In the thing, but in this one he does. Interesting. And then you play a lot with sort of frames. So you have, it starts at the party, and then inside of that we have a game show, and then we also have life, and then we also have the memories inside of her mind, and then we also have the court case, and then inside of the court case the game show comes, and that kind of thing. So that was kind of it. That was an interesting thing. And also, I guess, thinking about the mind, I guess I'm imagining the mind as just these series of squares that she goes into and into and into and into again and again and again. I don't know if that's a question. That's just my comment on
No, I like that. Yeah.
On the way that it's yeah, and the audience, I guess you break the frame too with the audience participation.
I see
so
it.
It's a lot of things. Yeah.
Oh, I see it too as very fluid. We always think about a stream of consciousness, and there's this thread. And this is again the spectacle. This is theatrical, that we hear water at the beginning of the play, and the conclusion of the play has to do with a river or water, and then the Greek river Styx. This kind of overlay of Greek mythology and mythos of like how those things connect, the way your brain flits to and from in a very fluid manner, organic manner, and rushes or is stopped by a rock or it can change path and flow around things. So I thought that was such a strong it's a very visceral type of play, where when you're in the theater and you have sound and texture and light and all of that will amplify, I think, those things. Is really interesting.
And you give nice payoff things. This is the comment section of the of the discussion now. You give little nuggets where like the scarf, and it pays off, the Greek thing that Eva just mentioned, and the book and the daughter, and then it pays off later, and you don't actually know, like when she's bringing I don't know where in the timeline that is anymore. And at a certain point, I don't know if it matters, like when things are happening, or if they're actually happening, or if it's real, but things do just structurally, the way that you have things pay off, where you plant something and then it's later. And then you have the doll that is a puppet. You imagine when you say puppet, I'm imagining someone animating her, right? But she gets animated a little bit by Celeste, right?
Right.
Is there any other, how are you imagining that she's animated? And this might be both of you guys.
I don't know. I think I'd like to hear from the director first.
Oh, I think that'll be an interesting directorial choice, right? In however they're telling that story, and who they allow to touch Celestial, the puppet version of the main character Celeste. I saw it as just a really beautiful, as someone with a disability, I definitely relate to the fact that your body is often separate and has its own agenda that is completely separated from your mental life, your imagination, your intentions mentally. And so I really felt a strong connection to this idea that we have all these moments when Celeste wants to itch her back or she's trying to scratch, and the actress can't get it because she's divorced from her body and she is a spectator and has a different sort of relationship with her body. And I think not just the issue with dementia, or I think physical disabilities relate to this too. And so I imagine that it would just be Celeste who animates this puppet. There are certain times called for where she's I hope everyone's seen the recording, but if you haven't, go watch it, because there's a moment where she is pleasuring herself. You know, it kind of evolves. And so there's a scripted moment when the child or the other people in the scene stop her. And so I think that those are very special moments when someone would interact with Celestial. So that's how I feel about the puppet, that it's a really cool symbol. And
because you have so many different kind of symbols in the play. What came first? So you had the courtroom, but then what was the next thing? Was it the doll? Was it the scarf? Was it the audience? What theatrical device, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think Celeste wanting to tell the story is the first, and then that, and I knew she kind of wanted to break the fourth wall, so I think the audience participation was pretty early. I mean, the puppet was in the first scene. You know, it's one of those things initially, I don't know to what degree, you know, I'm consciously making choices. It just seemed as if those things kind of came out initially, and then that began to dictate how I move forward a little bit. I'm not sure I can say there's like, oh, eureka, this is why I did this, and this.
Yeah, but like, oh, here I need this.
Yeah.
Now I need a game show, and now I need, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit was probably, you know, a little bit of research about Lewy body dementia, you know, that hallucination is kind of a part of that. So then it became what kind of a hallucination, and I don't know, maybe it was just the comment I think was something I've often thought was the comment she makes about, you know, as a kid, I watched a lot of television, you know, and as I got, you know, scolded. So at some point in my life, I started thinking, yeah, that's probably what's going to happen is I'll be in a nursing home at 90 and I'll be, you know, reciting commercials because so much stuff got in here that you don't know, you know. So there's a little bit of that probably.
I felt like every time Celeste needs us there. She talks about it a number of times, not just that she's glad that we're there and that we've come to this party that she's invited us to. She needs us there to tell this story. I think she doesn't trust herself, and she's afraid of being alone, is how I saw her. And so some of those spectacular, you know, abstract kind of magical moments come from a deep need to not be alone, and to fill in, and to, you know, I'm slipping, I've got to fill in someone to talk to, someone to guide me, someone to answer questions, or you know, until finally at the end of the play, the characters leave, the audience, you know, she doesn't talk directly to them anymore, and there's an acceptance and a simplicity that it's going to be okay. Like she acknowledges that she needed you, the audience, to be here so that she could tell the story and say goodbye and craft her narrative. And you need a witness to that, right? Like if you're going to tell your story, part of that is bearing witness, and that's a very sacred role. And then when it concludes, she's alone, but it doesn't seem sad. It seems like a release. I don't know. I don't know if that resonates or if that was Mike's intent, but yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that's fun.
Is she choosing, is she just letting go, or did one of the things that, and maybe this was super clear and I just was like confused, but is she going into like patient assisted suicide, or is she just letting go herself, or what it, like when she talks to the doctor, is that what she's talking about?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that was an option she was thinking of early on. I don't know then how you see it at the end, if she's just naturally passing or if there's other things you read into that.
Okay.
I mean, I think in my mind, I was seeing her as sort of passing, and maybe there's a hint of reincarnation with the child, the voice, the giggle of the girl over the sound of the water. She talks about the myth that if you drink of one river, you lose your memory. If you drink of the another, maybe you have a chance to, because. So I don't know. So there's a little bit of hint, but again, those might be the types of conversations I'd like for an audience. What does that mean? What does that mean? So that you begin to have more of a conversation, and not necessarily, because I kind of like those. Although it's frustrating if it's confusing. It's like, well, what does that mean? And that's the other risk of that.
No, I think
I'd rather leave it open ended.
Yeah, I think I'm asking if you want us to be asking that. Like, is it like one of the questions of the play is like people with dementia, and is this something that you would choose for yourself, or what would you do, and how do you feel about that? And yeah, and those kinds of things. What is the main question for you, actually, like flowing into that you would want? Do you want the main question that people walk away with to be about sexual agency in dementia, or is it that question about how do you feel about dementia? Or, I mean, there's like a slew of questions, and Eva, you may have a few other ideas about questions that audience members might walk away with, but what's the one that you were hoping for, or do you have one?
I don't know if I have one. I mean, like a specific, seems like bad dramaturgy on my part. But yeah, it was just the story, and I think there's a lot of questions, and I don't know if I have this idea of, you should really go home and talk about this one. I don't know if I honestly say this is the question. I don't know what Eva thought or what her impressions were of that. I don't know.
I think the spine of the play to me is about the body being divorced from your mind, and all that entails as far as sexual agency. Can I consent? Can I consent with my mind if my body is not responding to that, or vice versa? Because there's the opposite scenario that takes place in this play, where her body responds to someone else and is joyously giving consent in the stage directions and in the way she talks about it. But her mind doesn't really understand who she's having sex with or what the repercussions of that are, or the context of that. She's just, her body's responding and she's enjoying that. So we see both sides of it. And I think the Greek story, I mean, I think the reason, not the reason, the fact that she is a publisher and her business is story, her business is narrative, her business is actually editing, right? Which is the clipping off, and it's the cutting out of a story. It's not the creator, it's the shaper of story. And so it makes sense to me that her mind is trying to edit as she's remembering these bits and pieces, and she's making sense of it and wondering, does this go here? Why are we in this location? Oh, we came back to this location. And so she's constantly shaping the story, and how do you control your narrative if you're divorced from your body, and separated from your own truthful memories. So I think that's kind of the spine for me, is this separation. It's like, who are you? Are you your body? Can you be yourself without those memories and without full control of your body? When that changes, are you still yourself? Because that's really the essence of the question of consent, right? Like, can she consent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think as a playwright, I tend to like to deal with questions of morality, spirituality, those types of questions. So maybe in a broader sense, those might be parts of my play writing philosophy, without maybe necessarily wanting to say this is the question per se, but that's the sort of realm that I like people to be thinking about and debating.
Mm-hmm. I like that you gave the responsibility of judging the case to the audience. The characters are all her, right? Her daughter, her husband, the doctor, everyone that's in this play is through her lens, and she doesn't trust that lens. So she doesn't trust herself to judge whether he's guilty or innocent, and so she gives that responsibility to her partner, which is the audience, and says, you've got to do it. I don't trust myself to do that. So it's an interesting role to place on the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's I guess an ethics question, and it brings up like, when does the state need to protect your body, and when is it too much, and so many questions that I don't have an answer, like a firm answer to. I do, and this is something that in the chat someone brought up, is I wonder if the guilt and innocence is gendered at all, as in that men and women have different ideas about her consent, and the concept of consent in this case. So, I mean, that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I do. I thought immediately of those studies that say that, you ask male participants of the survey, have you ever raped someone? No. I mean, most people are going to say no. But then you list out the questions that are more subtle and nuanced, right? Have you ever had sex with your partner while she's under the influence? Have you ever had sex with someone who was asleep? Do you believe that you should always be able to have sex with your spouse? All of these kind of shades of what consent really is, and that it's given continuously. It's not one and done, right? Like, I consented 12 years ago, so now you can do whatever you want to my body. And those answers shows that, well, yeah, a lot of people don't understand the nuances of consent and have actually acted on that. Mm-hmm. So I thought about that, about the husband character, having one understanding of consent that was certainly different from my definition just as a person, but certainly Audrey's definition of consent, the daughter's definition of consent. Those are two different lanes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, she's problematic. Celeste, the concept of consent is even more problematic because she's giving enthusiastic consent, seemingly, and so it's not. It's us saying like yes, but this is not consent, is it?
You write these stage directions. There's 2 sexual encounters. One of them, she's enthusiastically giving physical responses. And the other one, she does not give any response.
Oh, you're right. She's not responding at all. You're right. In the second one.
And there's this kind of
first one.
Second. So is she still capable of it? Or is it just
yeah.
you know, this kind of dementia too?
Right, like because it fluctuates and you don't know, if she's present or not for it, and that also gives, I mean, I guess as a spouse, like, how do you know if she's going to be there present? Like, say she did have a lucid moment, how do you know she's going to be lucid the whole time?
And also,
I think I judged him good.
Your partner, if there's no, that's an interesting thing. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. I was talking with Andy about that. Like, if there's no response, are you digging that? Are you into it? If like there's not getting anything.
Yeah. Or is there some, and then like, I guess maybe a desperation of him maybe wanting to connect, but nothing being there. But that's dark though.
Yeah.
That's dark.
Complicated.
Yeah. And then ultimately too, I think the question is, you know, I think you asked the question, Melissa, about, you know, what point does the state have an obligation, or does the state overstep its bounds when they say, okay, because you're not as lucid as me, you no longer can have a sex life, you know? And then at what point is that the state, the government overstepping its bounds into making decisions about someone's autonomy?
Yeah, but like, and if they don't, is this person just getting taken advantage of? And like, how terrifying is that? It's like,
someone has to decide, and we know that the system isn't perfect. I mean, we know this in the play, the doctor views her one time, a very short amount of time, and makes a call. I think a lot about mental health care, about you know, no one wants to be controlled, but for the safety of yourself and others, when does the state get to tell you that you have to be medicated? And if so, what level of medication? And that you can be hospitalized, but only for a certain time. But, you know, legally very complicated. But they have some role. It's just, where does it start and where does it stop?
And it is interesting how you have the daughter there as like this other world of consent as well, where just because I'm a stripper doesn't mean I have now consented to be treated, you know, at all times to all things. And then you have their politics different, right? You have him as a more traditional conservative thinking male, and the father-daughter, which I can definitely relate to, of the sort of old school way of thinking, I guess, and this more progressive daughter. That's so specific, that relationship. Is there somewhere where that came from for you, to have like not just her upset with her dad about the mother, but to also have their politics be different?
I don't. I don't know if I wanted to. I mean, I think we get a pretty good sense of where Celeste is politically. I guess I kind of wanted to counterbalance that maybe a little bit so that she was a little more complex maybe than, maybe I also wanted to complicate it for the audience because we are so polarized. So you come to this court case, and you have to judge, if you're on the liberal side of this perspective, is that going to make you want to just get this conservative guy? Or, I mean, for the audience, then how do you juggle your own political inclinations versus can you be objective and just judge this? Or to what degree are you going to be skewing it because I don't know, I think that was part of it was interesting to me, where we are as a nation too, and how we view other people and judge other people, and can we be objective? And I don't know. So that's part of it.
Like, because now morality is becomes so married to politics.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
What about the role of race? I mean, there are a couple of things that you mentioned. The text mentions that the husband is not Black, whatever else that means, but it doesn't happen to be Black. And then the twins, the doctor and her twin, who is the social worker, are Navajo, or maybe you suggest like if you have a local, like wherever you are, insert your local
tribal affiliation.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the role of race and what you were thinking about when you were writing something?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to open up because where I teach at a college here in northeastern Arizona, our college services Navajo, White Mountain Apache, and Hopi. So a lot of my students are Native, and sometimes I feel guilty, because I do a play, and I'm asking them to play. I don't have a plethora of maybe students of racial diversity, so you might be doing like a couple of semesters ago, I did Sense and Sensibility, so you have characters written as white characters, but you may have people of other races, playing these characters. So sometimes I thought, it made me aware of just the dearth of roles sometimes for people to play. So I don't know, I felt like for some reason that maybe inspired me to write the Native character. My experiences of wanting to give more opportunities for Native actors. I think I kind of made maybe a little bit of a political comment about, Celeste talks about the fact that how the police officer treats her husband, and she makes the comment, well, that might have turned out very differently, if he had been a Black person. So I think maybe that influenced me to say, okay, that the husband should be a Caucasian. Mm-hmm. But and then sometimes I'm just saying, the race, like Celeste could be more a race neutral character. So I guess I'm looking for opportunities to give performers opportunities so that I'm not just necessarily assuming that they're going to be of a particular race, but trying to be a little more open-ended in terms of how the casting can go. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about it. Yeah. I haven't seen it quite described like that, race neutral, before. So I wondered if it changes the story. That was kind of my intent of like, what's the most fertile? First of all, Shariba could handle, I think, really beautifully with minimal rehearsal, tracking when she's clear and cognitively aware and when she's not, and because it goes back and forth so much. So without heavy rehearsal, someone who can really master where they are in their own story was really important. But we had some good conversations, I think, in the rehearsal space about how this story is different because we cast Black women, and whether some of those things were believable, or if it changes the story if they're a different race, and if it changes their characters, So it's interesting, like it'll be interesting in the different iterations when different directors make different choices, and how that
how that influences.
Amplifies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you have any really interesting, I mean, discussions about the fact that, okay, you were making those casting choices and how they felt about playing the characters? I'm just
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
curious.
Yeah, definitely. Without kind of speaking for them,
Mhm.
uh, but just from my perspective of their comments, you know, Kira Jones, who played Audrey, was like, yeah, she would not accept this stepfather character. The political commentary, the damage that does to the Black community, to have a relationship then with her mother as a Black, educated, like powerful woman who clearly it's talked about in the script that she isn't more progressive on the politics. And so it was sort of like, do we buy that she and that they're married and that they have a happy relationship? Because we don't see a lot of it. We don't see a lot of it. So we're making a lot of assumptions. It's the thing we know the least about is why they got married. Do they love each other? Are they simpatico? Are they like, what kind of partners are they? So that's kind of a mystery. I thought that for this reading, it would be most interesting. And then having Andy Thornton, who just in real life, and he exudes this on stage usually, is just the kindest, sweetest, most gentle person. If you know, exhibiting care. And so when I think of him feeding her applesauce and brushing her hair, and so I think of Andy in those roles, which would be very different than sort of this harsh, maybe commentator who has a podcast, who's got this conservative point of view. In my mind, I was trying to make it make sense of like, how did they get together? Where did they meet? What parties were they at? Where did they meet? And do they have any friends anymore? Because I mean, maybe if she can't stand him and his friends are totally, he's married to a Black woman. Is that believable, or is that so it just sort of, let's try it on for size and see if it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, oh, okay. I actually have another. So you were in, that's the rehearsal process question. Was there moments, Eva, also like that where um uh people, I guess, like either normally in a talkback we would be like, where did your attention wander?
Right.
um, so I guess if you were to maybe think about the first reading of the play, or moments that you felt like things were kind of digressing in a direction that you couldn't quite track. And it's kind of a weird question to ask for a play that is purposefully kind of disjointed and everything.
I definitely had to look at my notes when we got to the courtroom scene with all of the who's playing what role, and the fact that it's very self-aware. Mike's been very self-aware in the script, saying, listen, we got 5 actors here, like that's it. And we need more characters, but so put a wig on.
Like, has like a whole diatribe about
the American theater. Like, listen, we want to get the play produced, but we can't afford all of these people. So kind of self-aware and funny thing, but just tracking, wait, now you're prosecutor 3 and defense 2, but you're defense 1 and you're and I was like, as long as as long as the script let's just go. Yes, you're exactly right. So I think it's all there. It's just it was hard to track without the actors in the room yet. What other moments? I think the husband was definitely the biggest mystery to me. What's his deal? And how does she feel about him? So that's the part I felt like I couldn't get a lock on yet. Like,
Yeah, and I wonder, is that if that is intentional, just to keep things so that we're, by the time we get to the court scene. I was really surprised. Also, like moments when you're surprised of where the play is going. I was surprised about that there was a court case. It's interesting how like because she has I'm thinking, I guess, at the beginning that, okay, the play is going to be about, like at a certain point you're deciding whatever. And so I'm deciding at the point of when she has sex with the first guy. And I'm thinking that it's going to be about that. It's going to be about that event. And then it continues. It's interesting to me after the daughter has decided that her mom has essentially been raped, that she leaves her in the home still in the same place, just with a red tag. And um and it makes, like, later on you're like, okay, she doesn't really have many options, of like where to put her mom, and things like that. But is that really what happens? Like, if a woman is raped in a care facility, do they keep her there in the same room? I think that was my question.
Well, especially if the woman says she wasn't raped. Like she says,
Yeah,
I wasn't
she
raped. I was
was fine, but still, but they're like that question is there. Like, what happened to the guy? That she slept with? Like, was he reprimanded, or I don't know. Like, it seems like it was so, like, viscerally for me. I was like, oh my God, what's happened? I do really love how you kind of sit her, like, there's no solution for her when she has to sit with, when she actually remembers she's married, and she just has to sit with that, and we just have to sit with that, like, and we have no idea what she's feeling exactly, and she doesn't say. I kind of love that that's left open. But yeah, I'm trying to think, like, if my mom, I don't know. I don't know.
start over in a
Um,
new home, but then you have the same issues, right?
yeah, same issues. Maybe, yeah. And does this, like, red tag of, like, cannot give consent,
Yeah,
is
but if
that also
memory,
almost advertising to people too? Like, hey, look, this person's vulnerable.
on the fellow residents, if they're in a memory care facility, why would we trust that they could read and understand the red tag? Like,
Yeah, is that a real thing that they do in care facilities?
Not that I necessarily know of. It was more of maybe my attempt to try to, see how, okay, what are they doing? Maybe I was seeing it more for the care, the healthcare professionals recognizing, okay, because there are stories of, that of people having, sex with other residents, you know,
Yeah,
uh, and so, a spouse comes in, and then finds out, okay, your spouse no longer remembers you, but they're having a torrid affair with somebody else in the facility. And then
right.
you're the spouse who has now to deal with that and process how you feel about this. Um,
Mhm.
so I think there was just those elements there that, yeah, and the idea that, she's saying it's consensual or that she wanted to, and other people are saying they're judging it differently, and then trying to begin to get control of her and put her in the situations they want her to be in, um, and so the scene, I guess, that is the supposed, you know rape is happens later. We don't see that after, this red tag solution. It's more, um, uh,
someone had put in the, oh yeah, definitely. Someone put in the chat that the care facilities have a really high rate of STDs. Yes, the senior demographic is one of the highest growing populations with STDs. And a friend of mine who works for Planned Parenthood does a lot of training with older adults who hadn't used condoms or had been married for years and weren't worried about children. They're 65, 80 years old. They're not worried about it, getting pregnant, and they had one partner, so it doesn't occur to them. And there's more modern ways of protecting yourself against STDs than perhaps when they were much younger. And so, yeah, that's definitely true. That's a pretty high risk factor there. And yeah, get it. I mean,
what else are you gonna do?
I mean, get it. As long as it's, but that's the question, right? Like,
Is
how
it
do you
consensual? How do you know?
tell you as long as it's consensual?
Yeah.
Someone in the chat too, it's said that red tag, it's a way of the healthcare facility responding, like they legally they did something. There was a response, like maybe there's a protecting themselves, like, well, they requested a doctor, analyze her and see if she could give consent, and so we complied, and then we put up this red tag as just a kind of like a liability, like.
Okay. Is there anything that you specifically, Mike, wanted to ask or had questions about if you go back in?
Yeah, I don't know how many people are here, maybe who watched it online. I didn't have any sort of the comments in Memphis when it was live. In Michigan, there was at least one of the people felt like they were really confused early with a lot of maybe the shifting realities, and I just didn't know if anyone else had that sense of being confused about how some of those relationship dynamics shifted early in the play, or if you got any sense of that as working with actors, or if there's any people who participated by watching it who had any sort of confusion issues anywhere.
I don't know if you read the play before, Melissa, if you had any. I mean, I really tried to quickly find her purpose and what the through line was of why we were here. A memory play is not my cup of tea. I like a good deal more active, objective, like we're here for a reason. And I think this play, once we unpacked it, really did have that. She needed the audience there. We had to do it. There's high stakes because this might be the last time she remembers enough to put the story together. Honestly, casting Shariba, we didn't experience any confusion once we were reading it out loud of where she was in her capability cognitively, and where we were in time. I think there were a couple of questions about how far back certain things were. How long ago was this scene that we saw in the living room with the husband and wife to the incident in the room with the red tag? Like, what was the kind of actual, but then it doesn't matter. Because
I don't think that
years, or it could be 2 weeks, doesn't actually matter.
I think like when I purposefully asked what is the main question, and then I like what you're saying about stakes, because as you're doing these like fluctuating things and and this experimental thing, it can, if it's too built out, it can get mushy. And I do think like that's a good one, like stakes, like going through the play. The stakes are the sense of urgency that she is losing her ability to tell the story, or that because once we get to when we finally get to the court case, it's like everything suddenly becomes vivid and built out. And you have this like very robust thing, as opposed to like sort of these smaller snippet scenes. And so like weaving the through line, getting those smaller scenes to the, you know, your essence of the piece, or sort of your magnum opus, or the, you know, the final song, the big chorus piece. I guess I think that the story, everything is clear, but I think that the stakes do get muddy. Yeah, or that urgency. But, you know, I mean, on stage it might solve itself. I don't know. In a Zoom reading, it's kind of hard. But yeah, but that something, keeping those memories churning, or a reason why each and every single memory has to happen, you know, like boom, 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 because uh, because
Yeah, I
we
think
are going to death.
will help with that. Just like the red scarf, she sets it's like she's walking a gauntlet, and she set these little triggers for herself. You know, a plate of cookies, the red scarf, the chair here, or the this, that, you know. And so I think if I were directing a fully realized production, I would be sure to give her all of the triggers she needs as she wanders around and tries to make sense of it.
Oh
And then,
yeah, almost like those sticky note things
yeah,
that go with.
oh, why do I have this tied on my finger? Why do I have this red
Yeah.
string? Oh no, you know. But
I
give
love
her, she's laid out breadcrumbs. It's like a Hansel and Gretel of memory, right? She's laid out crumbs to find herself again,
Yeah.
just for this one last time. So
Yeah. Okay, final thing is, if there is a certain moment, if Mike was to go and he's about to, like, you know, cut something, and you're like, please do not get rid of that. What is that thing that you're like absolutely loving, that you do not want him to edit?
I think, again, if I were directing this fully realized, I would want to caution myself and the actors to not end the play multiple times, because I think that there are times that if it was played wrong, it seems like it comes to a conclusion, it comes to another conclusion, and then the play ends
Oh yeah, it has a little bit of that. Yeah.
Which you would want to push through and amplify. Why is that, like, why is that happening? Why have we tied this off, but the play is still happening? But I think her final speech, where it really ties it together about memory, her job as an editor, her identity, this Greek story, and the ending of the play with the river or the water, is a really strong image. And I think that when the lights go out after that, it's really powerful. Yeah, that's what I think.
The Greek bit.
Yeah.
One other question I had: how did you feel like the audience members felt about being put in that position of making that decision? Was that an uncomfortable place for them, or how they feel about that?
I love that.
Yeah, I think it'll be different every night of a production of this. And you know,
that's my definite keep. That's the one that I'm like, oh, please keep that.
Yeah,
please don't take that away.
Kira,
it's so hard.
She was saying, you almost need to advertise that this play is interactive. Otherwise it kind of borders on like theater cruelty of like, you're in it whether you like it or not, you know. Again, you're not being asked to do like take your shirt off or something really wild, but you are asked.
I have done that to an audience member.
Oh. Did it?
I did it first, so
so it's okay. But yeah, the audience has asked some intimate questions. You know, she talks to the person when she's recalling the story of sexual, a confusing sexual moment that she has when her uncle or cousin exposes himself to her, and she's talking to, so the light is just as much on that audience member as it is on her. So I imagine that would probably be the most uncomfortable moment for an audience member to both listen and take in this very hard story, and realize that you're on stage as well. That's an intimate thing to ask someone to do. Yeah, I mean, I think you'll have some people that are like, don't talk to me, and some people that might go the opposite way and maybe tell you too much. Maybe they'll tell you their own story and you go, oh.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this was a really moving and difficult and challenging piece, though. So thank you for making this, Mike. I hope that it does get it on its feet, because it would be really interesting. And I'm very interested in how the doll goes, that whole body separation thing. Yeah, it's good. And a great dilemma for the audience.
Great.
So, okay. Unless there's anything else, anyone final remarks? I think that is it.
Yeah, just thank you guys, and thank you to the actors too for investing. Yes. Shariba, Kira, Alex, and Tyler, and Andy. That was, I'd like to do the play with them, you know, and kind of get it on stage. So
yeah,
I would welcome that. Yeah. You're in a position sometime.
yeah, it would be great. Eva would be, yeah, perfect for something with puppets too.
So. Y'all know I love a puppet.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And yeah, good luck with everything. And hopefully we will see this play on its feet soon.
All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate your investing your time and energy.
Thank you.
And talent.